I've got something here. Let me cover this one first. You couldn't buy transmitting tubes on the open market because after World War I, the Navy and the tube companies wanted to keep it sort of a U.S. asset. And the companies out here were selling to Europe and places like that. So RCA was set up by General Electric and the U.S. Navy, and they put all the patents under the RCA brand and then cross-licensed them out to the various companies so they could all make them. But of course, they wouldn't cross-license Silicon Valley company. So the sole producers of these were the East Coast companies, and they refused to sell them. Therefore, the local companies had to either try to make their own or had to buy them maybe in Europe or buy bootleg copies somewhere. Anyway, that would have been a threat to RCA's domination. So both companies had to develop their own tubes. And Litton got into the local tube business at Federal Telegraph, the company I mentioned earlier in Palo Alto. They had about 60 engineers working on this, and they became a sole supplier of radios, and they built their own tubes for ITT. These were the radio stations that were installed on a lot of shipping lines and also in Europe and around the world. Bill Eitel, meanwhile, through a ham friend, got a job at Heinz and Kaufman, one of the other radio companies. And Heinz was a ham, and he was working on the same job, how to make tubes so that they could make their own equipment. And he recruited McCullough a year later. So the challenge is to design around the RCA patents, which was enormously difficult. So they hired a lot of local hams to help them. They collaborated with each other. Now, you wouldn't have expected this on the East Coast. No GE guy would talk to a Raytheon or an RCA guy or something like that. But out here, the companies were pretty small, and they had to work together to survive. And this was also based on their friendships. So when Eitel came up with some new ideas, Litton heard about it, and they could try it over at his tube shop, and vice versa. So they worked closely together and also with patent attorneys because they had the issue of trying to get around these patents. Well, they engineered a new rugged power tube with new materials, new manufacturing methods that didn't use the patents that existed. They had tantalum plates, shock-resistant seals. They created much higher vacuum, which gave them a longer life and a higher reliability. And they lasted a lot longer than the RCA tubes. And the key was they didn't infringe the RCA patents so that they couldn't be shut down. And hey, tubes look kind of like this. We'll pass some around in a little while. Anyway, Litton, on his side, invented a new, what was called a glass lathe, and I've got a picture of it here. It was for creating the tube on a symmetrical axis. It gave you a lot better precision, a lot better sealing. They could make tubes in large quantities, very repeatable, and it allowed them a lot more precision. And so, and he shared that with his buddies on the peninsula.